If your cucumber plants keep giving you a handful of skinny bitter fruits while someone else fills basket after basket from a garden that looks no better than yours, then chances are you are making one simple mistake before the first seed even starts growing. I see people buying expensive fertilizers and special products every spring, hoping this time things will be different, but they still end up disappointed because they miss the part that matters most. I made the same mistake years ago, and every season I wondered why my plants looked healthy for a while, and then slowly lost their strength just when they should have been producing the most cucumbers. The truth is that cucumbers are generous plants when you give them what they really need, but they are also quick to show you when something is wrong, even if the leaves still look green. That is why today I want to share the simple natural routine that changed everything for me, without expensive products and without complicated methods. Most people think the secret is hidden in some special fertilizer, but that is not where the real difference begins. It starts much earlier with the way the soil is prepared and with a few small steps that almost nobody takes anymore because they seem too ordinary to matter. An old gardener showed me these habits many years ago, and he smiled when he said that healthy soil grows healthy cucumbers long before any feeding begins. At first, I did not believe him, because the advice sounded too simple, but after one season I never went back to my old way. My cucumber vines stayed greener longer the flowers kept coming, and the harvest lasted well beyond what I was used to seeing. I also noticed that I spent less money because most of what I needed was already around my home or in my compost pile. That is one of the reasons I still use this method today. It saves time, it saves money, and it gives results you can actually see with your own eyes. But before we even think about planting seeds or young plants, there is one small detail in the soil that most gardeners ignore every single year, and that single detail decides whether the roots become strong enough to carry a heavy harvest through the hottest part of summer. That is exactly where I always begin, and it may surprise you how easy it really is. The first thing I always do is prepare the soil instead of rushing to plant, because healthy cucumbers begin below the surface where nobody can see what is happening. Most people loosen the ground a little, make a hole and think that is enough, but later they wonder why the plants stop growing when the weather turns hot. Years ago, an older neighbor watched me planting and quietly said that cucumbers do not forgive tired soil. At the time, I did not understand what he meant, but after following his advice, I finally saw the difference for myself. I never leave the soil empty or dry before planting. I mix in well-finished compost because it keeps the ground soft and helps hold moisture without becoming heavy. If I have a little old leaf compost, I add that too because it makes the soil easier for young roots to spread. I also work in a small handful of wood ash if I know I have not used much of it before. I never use too much because a little is enough. Many people skip these simple things because they are looking for something more impressive, but I have learned that ordinary natural materials often do more than expensive bags from the garden store. Another mistake I see all the time is planting into cold soil just because the calendar says it is time. Cucumbers love warmth, and they tell you very quickly when the ground is still cold. The seedlings sit almost without growing, and they lose valuable days that they never fully recover. I would rather wait a few extra days until the soil feels comfortably warm in my hand than hurry and regret it later. While I am waiting, I cover the bed with a little compost or old mulch so the warmth stays in the ground longer. It costs almost nothing, and it gives the young plants a much better start. Very few people still do this because it seems too simple to matter, but I have watched the difference for many seasons. The plants that begin with warm, loose living soil grow stronger, stems, larger leaves, and healthier roots without needing constant attention later. That strong beginning makes every feeding and every watering much more effective through the rest of the season. But even the best prepared soil can lose its advantage if you make one very common mistake during the first watering after planting, and that is exactly what I want to show you next, because this single habit changed the way my cucumbers grew every summer after that dot. After the plants are in the ground, I never rush to feed them, because that is another mistake I made for years. I used to think that more fertilizer meant faster growth, but all I got were soft leaves and weak vines that looked impressive for a short time and then struggled when the first flowers appeared. An older gardener laughed when he saw what I was doing and told me that young cucumber plants should first learn to build strong roots before asking them to carry a heavy harvest. I remembered those words, and they have stayed with me ever since. The first watering after planting is something I never treat as an ordinary job. I water slowly and deeply so the moisture reaches well below the surface instead of only wetting the top layer. When people water a little every day, the roots stay close to the surface where the soil dries quickly under the sun. Then the plants begin to suffer every time the weather becomes hot. I would rather water less often, but give the roots a good deep drink. That encourages them to grow downward where the soil stays cooler and holds moisture longer. Very few gardeners have the patience for this because they want to finish watering as quickly as possible, but this one habit has saved me from many problems during dry summers. About a week after planting, when I see fresh, healthy growth, I give the plants their first gentle natural feeding. I like using homemade compost tea because it is simple, almost free, and easy to prepare. I never make it too strong because young plants do not need a heavy feeding. They only need steady support while they continue building healthy roots and fresh leaves. Sometimes, if I have well-rotted manure that is fully broken down, I use a small amount around the plants, but I never place it directly against the stems. That is another mistake many people make without realizing it. Keeping a little space around the stem helps prevent unnecessary problems while still allowing the nutrients to slowly move into the soil with each watering. After that, I spread a layer of straw or dry grass around the plants. It may not look exciting, but this old method has served gardeners for generations. The mulch keeps the soil cooler, holds moisture much longer, and saves me from watering as often during the hottest weeks of summer. It also keeps many weeds from taking over the bed, which means the cucumber plants keep more of the food and water for themselves. These simple steps may not seem important on their own, but together they quietly build the kind of healthy plants that continue producing long after many other gardens begin slowing down. Still, there is one stage that decides whether those beautiful flowers become crisp, healthy cucumbers or simply fall to the ground. And that is where most people unknowingly lose a large part of their harvest. When the first flowers appear, most people become excited because they think the hard work is finished, but for me, that is the moment when I pay even closer attention. A cucumber plant can produce many flowers and still give only a small harvest if it begins to lose strength during this stage. I learned that lesson after several disappointing seasons when the flowers looked beautiful for a few days and then quietly dropped before becoming fruit. I thought insects were the problem or that the weather was against me, but the real reason was much simpler. The plant was using all of its energy just trying to survive instead of building cucumbers. That is why I always give it gentle support exactly when it needs it most. One of my favorite old methods is a simple feeding made from fermented weeds or young nettles mixed with water and allowed to sit for several days until it is ready. It is not expensive, and it is something almost anyone can prepare at home. Before using it, I always dilute it with clean water because stronger is not better. A light feeding every couple of weeks is far more useful than one heavy feeding that overwhelms the plant. If I do not have nettles, I use compost tea instead, because both methods have given me reliable results over the years. Another thing I never forget is checking the soil before watering. Many people water by habit every evening without looking at the ground first. If the soil is still moist, a second watering only pushes air away from the roots and slowly weakens the plant. I simply press my finger a few inches into the soil. If it still feels cool and damp, I wait another day. This small habit has saved me countless buckets of water, and my cucumber plants have always looked healthier because of it. I also remove old yellow leaves near the bottom of the vines once they are no longer helping the plant. I never remove too many at once because healthy leaves are still feeding the cucumbers, but clearing a few older ones improves airflow and keeps the plants looking fresh. Very few people do this carefully. Some remove almost nothing while others strip away far too many leaves. I prefer a slow, steady approach because it puts less stress on the plant. By this point, the vines usually become thicker, the flowers continue opening, and the first cucumbers begin growing faster than many people expect. It feels rewarding because all the small, simple jobs done earlier finally begin showing real results. But there is still one mistake that can quietly ruin even the healthiest cucumber plants during the hottest weeks of summer, and avoiding it often means the difference between an average harvest and vines that continue producing until the season is almost over. By the middle of summer, this is usually the moment when many gardeners begin saying that their cucumber plants are finished because the vines slow down, the leaves lose some of their deep green color, and the harvest becomes smaller every week. I used to think that was simply the natural end of the season, but I later realized that most of the time the plants were only asking for a little help at exactly the right moment. The biggest mistake I see is letting the soil become dry for several days, and then trying to fix everything with one heavy watering. That sudden change puts stress on the roots, and the plant spends valuable energy recovering instead of producing new cucumbers. I learned long ago that steady care always beats dramatic action. During hot weather, I check my plants every morning instead of every evening, because it is much easier to notice small changes before they become real problems. If I see the mulch becoming thin, I add another light layer of straw or dry grass. It keeps the soil cooler and slows down evaporation without costing anything. That simple habit has saved me many hours of watering during long dry periods. Another old method that I still follow is harvesting cucumbers while they are still young and firm instead of waiting until they become very large. Many people leave them on the vine thinking they will get an even bigger harvest, but the opposite often happens. The plant begins putting all of its energy into those older fruits and slows the production of new ones. I walk through the garden every day or two and pick every cucumber that is ready. It only takes a few minutes, but the vines continue flowering because they believe they still need to produce more fruit. Very few people stay that consistent, yet it makes a remarkable difference over an entire season. I also look carefully under the leaves because that is where problems often begin. If I notice damaged leaves or signs of disease, I remove only the affected ones and keep the area around the plants clean. Good airflow and clean soil have protected my cucumbers far better than chasing every new product that appears in the garden center. These are quiet habits that almost nobody talks about because they are simple and cost almost nothing, but together they keep the plants healthy much longer than most people expect. By following these small routines year after year, I have watched cucumber vines continue producing when many nearby gardens had already stopped, and there is one final habit that brings everything together and helps stretch the harvest, almost until the weather itself says the season is over. Dot. The longer I grow cucumbers, the more I believe that a great harvest is not the result of one miracle trick, but of many small habits that work together. By late summer, my plants are usually still covered with fresh flowers while many other gardens already look tired. People often ask me what fertilizer I bought or what special variety I planted, and they seem surprised when I tell them that the biggest difference comes from paying attention to the little things every single week. I never stop checking the plants just because they have already produced well. Every few days I look at the leaves, the vines, the soil, and the new fruit, because small problems are always easier to solve than large ones. If I notice the mulch becoming thin, I replace it. If I see weeds starting to compete with the plants, I remove them before they spread. If the vines become too crowded, I gently guide them so that air and sunlight can reach more of the leaves. These simple jobs take only a few minutes, but they help the plants stay productive much longer. Another habit that has helped me for many years is feeding the soil instead of chasing the plant. After every good harvest, I add a little compost around the base of the vines and water it in gently. I do not expect overnight results because healthy soil works slowly, but it keeps giving back day after day. Many gardeners are always looking for an instant solution, but nature usually rewards patience more than speed. One thing I have also learned is not to be afraid of removing old cucumbers that have become too large or misshapen. Leaving them on the vine only tells the plant that its work is almost finished. I would rather remove them and encourage the plant to keep producing fresh, healthy fruit. That small decision has given me many extra baskets of cucumbers over the years. Perhaps the best part of these old methods is that almost anyone can follow them. You do not need expensive equipment or shelves full of products. A little compost, some natural mulch, careful watering, and regular harvesting are often enough to produce strong, healthy vines that continue rewarding you week after week. Every season reminds me that the simplest methods are often the ones that last the longest, because they work with the plant instead of forcing it. And before we finish, there is one final lesson that completely changed the way I look at gardening, because it is not really about cucumbers at all. It is about creating a garden that becomes healthier with every passing year, instead of starting from the beginning every single spring. When I look back over all the years I have spent growing cucumbers, I realize that the biggest reward was never just the baskets full of fresh vegetables. It was the confidence that came from knowing exactly what my plants needed without depending on expensive products or complicated advice. Every season teaches me something new, but the simple methods have remained the same because they continue working year after year. Good soil, careful watering, natural feeding, regular harvesting, and a little patience have given me healthier plants than I ever had when I was searching for quick solutions. That is why I always tell people not to worry if their last season was disappointing, because almost every gardener has been there, including me. A poor harvest does not mean you cannot grow beautiful cucumbers. It usually means the plants were missing one or two small things that are very easy to correct once you understand them. I still remember how satisfying it felt the first time I walked through the garden every morning and picked crisp, healthy cucumbers day after day without feeling frustrated or wondering what had gone wrong. There's something special about carrying a basket filled with vegetables that you grew using simple, natural methods. You know exactly what went into the soil, and you know every cucumber was produced through steady care rather than expensive shortcuts. That feeling never gets old, no matter how many seasons pass. If you decide to follow these methods, do not expect perfection from the first day. Watch your plants carefully because they will always tell you what they need if you learn to notice the small changes. Gardening is not about rushing. It is about building healthy soil, healthy plants, and healthy habits that become easier every year. Before long, you may discover that your cucumber vines stay productive much later than they used to, and your harvest becomes larger without making your work harder. That is exactly what happened to me, and it is the reason I still enjoy walking into the garden every morning after all these years. I hope these simple ideas help you enjoy your own garden a little more and save some money at the same time, because the best lessons are often the oldest ones. And next time I would like to share another forgotten natural method that has helped me keep vegetable plants healthy and productive through some of the hottest summers I have ever seen. I think many gardeners have forgotten just how effective it really is.